Well, I have an announcement to make. I'm not one of the famous Flames. Those of you who know James Brown. Good morning, everyone. Rev, thank you for that introduction. Folks, you're looking at the one title I can claim is I am Mr. Amtrak. When I travel, I tell you, they keep, as the press will tell you, they keep fastidious records of how many miles you fly in an Air Force plane. And about 6.5 years in, the headlines in the paper was Biden travels over 1 million miles in Air Force Two. And I tried to go home to see my mom every Friday, and I didn't want to take that G5. It cost too much money. I'd take the train. The Secret Service didn't like that. They thought it was more dangerous. And so I'm getting on the train, and a guy named Angelo Negri, one of the senior guys in the road, I've been riding since 1973, came up and he grabbed me and said, Joey, Joey, grabbed my cheek. I thought the Secret Service was going to shoot him. And he said, Joey, 1 million miles, big deal. He said, you know, the boys and I sat down and figured out how many miles you've traveled on Amtrak. I said, you did, Angie? He said, yeah, average 119 days a year for 36 years. Then as vice president, we figure it's 8,210 round trips, 259 miles a day. Joey, you've traveled over 2 million miles on Amtrak. I don't want to hear any more about Air Force Two. So, folks, ride Amtrak. Look, let me be quick and get to the point. Everybody knows today and about looking back on the legacy of your dad. It's about carrying that legacy forward. In October, I was invited to the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis to receive the Freedom Award, a thing when I sat in black churches on the east side of Wilmington getting ready to, and by the way, next to two Jewish rabbis, getting ready to go out and desegregate movie theaters in Delaware. I never, ever thought in my life I would be worthy of, and I'm still not sure I'm worthy of it. But I stood in that balcony in Lorraine Motel where your dad was assassinated. And it brought me back to that moment in 1968. The balcony leads back into Dr. King's room, and nothing's changed. The beds are still unmade. The coffee cups are still scattered around the room. And when you walk in, you can feel that restless spirit. I mean, you can feel it. You can taste it. It's still in the room of a dream deferred, of unfinished business. The night before your dad, as you well know, Martin, was assassinated, he stood in the pulpit in Mason Temple talking to 2,000 people. What was he talking about? It was a strike. It was about wage, but it was ultimately about dignity. He was insisting that these garbage workers be treated with dignity. Dignity. And ladies and gentlemen, the fact of the matter is that many of you remember exactly what he said. It may not have been the last sentence, but it was close to the last sentence. He said, let us move on in these powerful days, these days of challenge, to make America what it ought to be. To make America what it ought to be. We all know what it ought to be. That was among his last words spoken. To make America what it ought to be. America's been made better for all the struggles many of you in this room have endured and led. But we've learned in the last 2 years, it doesn't take much to awaken hate, to bring those folks out from under the rocks, that part of American society that's always been there, will always be there, but has been legitimized. 50 years later, the hate that cut your dad down is still nurtured by those forces of darkness. We saw it in Charlottesville as Klansmen and white supremacists literally, and neo-Nazis literally slunked out of their dark rooms, their digital hideaways, their crazed and vicious faces, literally contorted. illuminated by torchlight. Could make up a Hollywood movie like that in a historic city and confronted by decent, honorable Americans who said, "This is not us." Dr. King knows those faces well, those same lost souls that once stood like cowards, hooded behind burning crosses. They have been deliberately reawakened again, those forces. It's not an accident. They have been deliberately reawakened again. Unearthed by loose talk, by direct appeals to prejudice from the alt-right. And then something I never thought I would live to see again, having a president of the United States make a moral equivalence between those who were spreading the hate and those who were opposing it, saying there were, quote, very fine people on both sides. No presidents in the Civil War have ever uttered words like that. One thing we know for certain, we've learned it over and over again through history, whether it's the Holocaust or the Civil Rights Movement, silence is complicity. Silence is complicity. And so, we have to do what you've been doing, Rev, and you've been doing at the NAACP, but everybody's been doing in this room for a long time. We have to speak out. We have to challenge these forces of hate and stand up and simply say what the vast majority of Americans agree to. This is not our America. No, we're for real, not applaud. This is not who we are. This is not the image we wish to spread around the world, which is happening. This is not who we are, because it's not who we are. Years ago, there used to be a poll tax. Now, as our last speaker pointed out, just last year, 24 states introduced or enacted at least 70 bills to make it harder for people to vote. They now use the voter ID laws like the poll tax used to be used, simply designed to keep people from being able to vote. We saw it in Georgia in the governor's race. We saw it in Florida. We saw it in other parts of the country. 2017. These guys never give up. We knew that. They never will give up. It's like cutting grass, man. You cut it, it looks nice, but you let it go for a while, it gets a little ugly, then it grows into a forest again. We can't let this happen. You know, I've been in this fight for a long time. It goes not just to voting rights, it goes to the criminal justice system. I haven't always been right. I know we haven't always gotten things right, but I've always tried. Rev, it was your help back in 2010 that Barack and I finally reduced the disparity in sentencing, which we've been fighting to eliminate, in crack cocaine versus powder cocaine. It was a big mistake when it was made. We were told by the experts that crack, you never go back. It was somehow fundamentally different. It's not different, but it's trapped an entire generation. As vice president, I saw firsthand the courage of Barack, the president. He's my buddy. No, he really is my buddy. All those memes are true, except he did the first friendship bracelet, not me. But every day, I've always been proud of his courage. Never more than when he commuted over 1,700 sentences, more than the past 13 presidents in a row. I was proud that our reforms have helped federal prison population be reduced by 38,000 people. Well, most people don't know 91% of all the people kept in prison are in state prisons. They're not in federal prisons. That's where the overcrowding is, in state prisons. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to say to the states, no more. No more mandatory sentences. Enough is enough is enough. We should be reducing those sentences. And folks, look, and federally, we need to once again and finally for all eliminate all the disparity between crack and powder. We need the legacy of debtor prisons, and we have a legacy of debtor prisons called cash bail. My daughter runs the Delaware Criminal Justice Center. She's been fighting for 2 years. Finally, the Attorney General of Delaware just announced they're going to eliminate cash bail in the state of Delaware. It can be done. Folks, the fact of the matter is that the bottom line is we have a lot to root out, but most of all, there's systematic racism that most of us whites don't like to acknowledge even exists. We don't even consciously acknowledge it. But it's been built into every aspect of our system. Because when your schools are substandard, when your houses are undervalued, when your car insurance costs more for no apparent reason, when poverty rates for black Americans is still twice that of white Americans, when Barack says if your name is Jamal and your name is Jim, and you have the same qualifications and Jim gets the job, there's something we have to admit, not you, we. White America has to admit there still is systematic racism. And it goes almost unnoticed by so many of us. When all that is surrounding us, is it any wonder that there is still that spirit of restlessness out there? How do we ensure that every American can live a life of dignity? How do we fulfill the promise that working people who still go to bed like my dad used to, staring at the ceiling, thinking, God, if I get prostate cancer, or if my wife gets breast cancer, we lose everything. We lose single biggest reason for bankruptcy. We lose everything. How can we stand by guaranteeing that every single American can get affordable health care and medications because your health shouldn't depend on the color of your skin or your zip code? But it does. One study found that there are 30 million U.S. jobs waiting to be filled that don't need a college degree, a bachelor's degree. When I wrote for the president a year of study of the jobs of the future, right then and there were 100,000 factory jobs going unfilled for high tech because we didn't train people for those skills. The average salary, according to this study, is $55,000 a year. 30 million U.S. jobs that don't require a bachelor's degree that pay $55,000 a year. Whether it's college, trade school, certificate, apprenticeships, community colleges, 6-week coding programs, every single solitary child is capable of doing something consequential and filling these jobs. It's not rocket science. No, it really isn't. It's an absolute simple commitment. Folks, what the hell are we arguing about a $15 minimum wage for? Why is it even a question? No, real. Below that rate, you're below the poverty level. People working, busting their necks. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to eliminate, which you probably don't even realize, there's 40 million people out there who have to sign a non-compete agreement. You work for the equivalent of a Wendy's. You can't go to work, you can't compete and go to work for McDonald's if they pay you 5 cents more. The fact of the matter is that these are hourly jobs. People are having to sign non-compete agreements. What the heck are we doing? Folks, we need better public transportation and so much more that will literally change the lives of ordinary people, black, Hispanic, and some whites as well. Rev, I'm optimistic. The reason I am, and I'll end on this, is I know I was always referred to, as the mayor knows, as the White House optimist. I always kind of liked that. It made me look like I was the young guy. But they're longer than all of them. As my grandfather would say, I didn't fall off the turnip truck yesterday. But folks, new generation of millennials, those born after 1980. A study at Georgetown University showed not only are they the best educated, the most engaged, they are also the least prejudiced generation in American history. And they have been awakened, like my generation was by your father. They have been awakened. Ladies and gentlemen, over 60% of this millennial generation believe that increasing, not accepting, increasing diversity is good for them and good for America. That has never, ever happened in any polling in American history. So folks, we got a whole army out there that's ready. I said to the Rev, or I said to you, Martin, think about how things have changed. Turn on the television. How many biracial ads do you see? They're no, I'm serious. They're normal. They're normal. What's behind is our government. What's behind is these people of prejudice have found their voice again. And ladies and gentlemen, we've never come this close before. They've been awakened, they're ready to speak, they're ready to vote, they're ready to win. And all of a sudden, 10 years ago, when people tell me things can't change, 10 years ago yesterday, Rev, I stood on a platform in Wilmington, Delaware at the Amtrak station. And I was at the end of the platform, what we call overlooking the 3rd Street Bridge, neighborhood I used to represent as a public defender in Southeast Wilmington. I got back from law school and I had a job with a white shoe law firm, but because my state was the only state in American history, my city occupied by the National Guard since Reconstruction for 9 months, I quit my job and I became a public defender. I used to go down those neighborhoods, as you know, you've been there with me, and interview folks. As I looked out, I'm standing there with my 2 sons and my daughter and my wife, waiting for a train. I looked out over what used to be, I remember, there are now houses there now, but there are vacant lots where kids used to play, people used to live. And I thought things would never get better again because they'd been burned to the ground. Never get better. And here I was, and it just hit me, standing, waiting for a black man to come 28 miles from Philadelphia to pick me up and take me on a 128-mile ride to be sworn in as President and Vice President of the United States. Don't tell me things can't change. Don't tell me it can't change. So folks, you know, I apologize, I've gone too long, but my friend Reverend Barber put it this way. It isn't enough, he said, just to remember Dr. King. He said we have to, quote, reach down in the blood, pick up the baton, and carry it the rest of the way. I know that's metaphorical, but it is literally true. The next generation is coming to carry it forward. So don't tell me there's no reason for hope. I've never been more optimistic than I am today. I still believe that dreams within our reach. As your dad said, let's move on in these powerful days and America, make America what it ought to be. Because in fact, it can be. Please, please, please don't give up hope.
There are over 8,500 videos on this one Mox News YouTube page. It takes a great deal of time and effort to make that happen. And I don't have plans and schemes. And I don't have hopes and dreams. I don't have anything if I don't have you. And I don't have love to share. And I don't have ones who care. I don't have anything if I don't have you. You, 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 you.